Welcome to Catholic Homeschool Radio, where we begin conversations to help parents enrich their lives and make practical decisions for the future.
Welcome, friends. Priscilla McCaffrey here to discuss with my friend, John O'Shaughnessy, the topic of evolution. John is what I call a literary scientist. He is a doctor of veterinary medicine and took his knowledge to Wall Street as a research analyst. Is that right, John?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, he's developed and marketed his own products, and he's always bringing scientific readings into our discussions on theology, politics, and culture. So he often provides the empirical data our theoretical conversations often lack. So you got to hug your geeky science friends out there who worship before the same altar. And I love the Catholic engineers, the scientists, and the physicists. They have so much to say, and we don't hear from them often enough. And partly because we think so many tough questions are only theological or philosophical. What I like is that I ask John a question in the realm of science, and he can summon the terms for the ignorant masses. He can make it understandable and without all the scientific jargon. So, of course, evolution comes up, and I want to know what he is reading in his journals about the topic and what's going on. Is there anything new? Have believers and evolutionists simply arrived at a stalemate? And before I ask the first question, I also want to bring in a favorite of mine, J.R. Tolkien, and he says something kind of sweet, and I think it's interesting because he's the creator of his own world, and in his world, he has both a creator and a sub-creator. And there seems to be a little evolution from man to hobbits, but that's what I've heard. I'm not sure about that. This is what he says. He wrote this in a letter during wartime to his son Christopher. And he says, "As for the Garden of Eden, I think most Christians, except the very simple and uneducated, or those protected in other ways, have been rather bustled and hustled now for some generations by the self-styled scientists. And they've sort of tucked Genesis into a lumber room of their mind as not very fashionable furniture, a bit ashamed to have it about the house, don't you know, when the bright, clever young people call." And I suppose even in wartime, you can't get away from the tangle of evolution, or maybe the chaos intensifies the need to steady one's soul. In the trenches, you still want to know if there's purpose to man's existence. So, John, welcome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for visiting with me.
My pleasure.
Did I describe your some of your skills and
sure,
talents,
sure.
and did I leave anything important out?
There's 56 years of it, but no, that's very good. Thank you.
Have you ever taught in institutions of higher learning?
Oh, no. My career really has been in consulting, the pharmaceutical industry, going to Wall Street, which took advantage of my expertise and understanding of drug development, in the sense of, making investments into up-and-coming technologies. So it's mostly been at the interface of science and finance, to be really truthful about it. So.
And then why is it that you do read, I know you read a lot of different journals, and I know you have kept up, or you used to keep up on the questions of evolution. So.
Yes, because I think as a Catholic, and as a Catholic who is scientifically literate and not innumerate, there are so many things that scientists claim to be true, which often upon deeper investigation turn out to be really just philosophical or political statements, but they cloak themselves in their scientific credentials. I'm a Nobel laureate, therefore I can expound upon whether God exists, or philosophy. Well, okay, if you're trained as a philosopher or just as a human being who thinks, you might have an interesting opinion, but it's not necessarily true. And we've gotten into the scientism kind of thing in our culture where all the answers are science. And one of the things that I think anyone who really works in it honestly recognizes is, and as a friend of mine, and Brian Blomquist very well, who's a a senior researcher, a senior scientist, Eli Lilly. His joke is that science can measure with great precision the trivial. It doesn't explain anything about purpose, why we're here, where we're going. It doesn't say anything about meaning. But, they can take out to several digits, the measurement of, the speed of light or whatever thing you're interested in. So it doesn't say anything about meaning, and it doesn't say anything about purpose. It doesn't say anything about your consciousness, who you are as a person.
Okay. Well, a lot of them don't claim to either.
A lot of them do claim to.
Okay, so there's an arrogant
Yes, for
school
example,
of evolutionary thought, and then the others who say, I don't know, I just measure things.
Well, that's why evolution is such an interesting topic. I mean, it kind of covers that. If you really get into the literature on evolution, it does not demonstrate what they claim that it does. Maybe we should just jump right into it. What is evolution?
Yeah.
They want to give the impression that change that we observe in nature and in the world generally is something that's due to random chance. Several years ago, there was a funny little gaffe by a evolutionary biologist from the Ohio State University who was describing some concept related to evolution. He said, think about it like a car. You see these pictures of cars. It starts off as a horseless carriage, and then it loses its fenders. It sort of evolves into the sleek modern machine.
Yeah.
And that's what evolution is like. And of course, the joke then was, well, where do those cars come from?
Yeah.
They're the product of intelligent design.
Right.
Automotive engineers did it. If you actually look at the evolutionary record, it doesn't look like that at all. It's not a steady progression. The fossil record demonstrates actually the opposite of what Darwin thought it was. Darwin even recognized that would be a big problem for him. And it doesn't demonstrate that. And so the kinds of things that they show as proofs of evolution are typically what's called microevolution. Bacteria taking on antibody resistance. The industrial melanism thing, the peppered moths becoming black because of the soot on the trees to avoid detection. But then it turns out even those were faked. That's now well understood.
Really?
I mean, for example, moths don't live on branches in the daylight. Those moths actually are nocturnal. Anyone who's got a porch light knows that most moths are at night, not during the day. So it really doesn't matter if they're light or dark.
Yeah.
And then...
well, I remember as a child... hearing things like, well, the reason the Chinese developed slanty eyes was, and then they'd come up with something preposterous, and I'd think, well, that does not make any sense to me.
Well, one of my favorites is Evo Psycho. It's the evolutionary psychology. So why do human beings behave the way they do? So, for example, the reason we have higher intellect, higher faculties is because we wanted to throw rocks to kill rabbits and stuff. And that's a similar side of the brain. So you develop that by throwing. Suddenly you develop the ability to understand quantum physics and write great symphonies.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that they're always doing is they want to make it seem like these amazing qualities and features of the human person are simply a result, a sort of a quality that's necessary for survival taken to a higher degree. Mm-hmm. Okay, but.
Okay, I want to.
But that's like saying That's like saying a cheetah. To use I think it was Scott Hahn used this example.
Developed
a cheetah supersonic. Well, that's a lot faster than needs to be to run down an antelope.
All right, now that's...
So we're kind of going off on a tangent, but...
Well, yeah, kind of, partly because what we've just talked about is what you might hear in grade school or high school or in college, and these are people who just use evolutionary theory, whether they're real scientists or not, to explain away things.
It's storytelling.
It is storytelling, but... It's
an alternate myth to Genesis.
But the real people of science who aren't interested in explaining anything, but just simply say the empirical evidence is there. Mm-hmm. That's one question I have. Is there empirical evidence of evolution?
They would claim that there is, but if you really look, there isn't. So, for example, the fossil record.
Yeah.
You would expect it to be filled with transitional life forms. As something goes from a fish or a worm, it starts slowly developing these other features that will allow it to become a terrestrial animal, for example. They don't exist. I'm suddenly blanking on the bird. the dinosaur bird.
The albatross?
No.
Pterodactyl?
Suddenly, I don't know why I'm suddenly blanking, but that actually is not a progenitor of birds. It's actually an evolutionary dead end of dinosaurs, and actually birds pre-existed that.
Or coexisted with
them?
them?
No, pre-existed. There are actually birds out there before these feathered dinosaurs came about, so at least some of them. And then the other thing that's kind of difficult for them to explain is life has basically been around about 3.8 billion years.
Is that what everybody
That's
agrees?
Pretty much everyone agrees.
3.8 billion.
3.8, and that's
just
bacteria.
Life.
Just
no,
bacteria.
We're not talking about
we're just talking about bacteria.
Earth. We're not even talking about
the Earth was about 4 billion years. So life appeared almost instantly after the Earth was formed, and the bombardment of asteroids and all those things settled down. So it wasn't like we took billions and billions of years to develop the life that we have. It was literally within a few million years. And it gets worse for them. So then nothing happens basically for roughly 3.5 billion years until what's called the Cambrian explosion. All 70 major body type designs that we see in life occurred in the Cambrian era.
You mean of animals,
vegetable, insects, plants, everything.
Fungi.
So basically we're kind of cruising along with bacteria, some weird kinds of worms, trilobites, a few like kind of unusual things. And then suddenly it was the Big Bang of life, about 500 million years ago.
Okay, so that's a second Big Bang.
That was the Big Bang of life. The Big Bang of the universe, that was about, 14 billion years ago.
Is this Big Bang of life, is that descriptive, or is that what people have been talking about?
People have talked about that for quite a few years now. Okay. And it really came about.
It hasn't trickled down to the masses.
Well, it's not the Big Bang in the sense of it just completely started de novo. What it really was you had bacteria for several billion years, and then all of the more sophisticated life forms that we're used to seeing appeared. It could be as little as 80 million years. Stephen Meyer, who's a well-known evolutionary theorist, but an intelligent design person. In his book, he's saying that it could have been just even less than single-digit million years if you really look at the fossil evidence. And the thing that's been causing this kind of rethink was early in the 20th century was the discovery of the Burgess Shale in Canada, where it was clear that all of these forms were appearing very quickly. And then in the 90s, I can't remember the name in Chinese, but there was a similar discovery, a massive discovery of fossils in China, which completely confirms what they saw in the Burgess Shale. Nothing, and then suddenly it all appeared. Making it even weirder was the atmosphere and the oceans were toxic pretty much up to that point. So it was actually very difficult for life to evolve. But the second conditions improved, all of the life as we know it pretty much appeared. So another problem, of course, you have is if we're constantly transitioning from one kind of life form to another, you look around the world and where are the transitional forms now? They're all what's called terminally differentiated. They're not things trying to become something else. I mean, everything looks like it's in its place, and it's definitive, and it's a complete organism.
Now, for the average person out there, we feel that we've read articles like in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal about somebody who's found a transitional form. Is that
what you're thinking? Well, I know because we've chatted about it. The hominids, the human precursors. Someone made a joke that there are more paleontologists than there are hominid bones because they're so rare and in between. We can't even pinpoint how old modern humans are. I mean, estimates range from 40 or 60,000 years to maybe 300,000 years.
Oh, okay.
And some of those estimates are based upon what's called genetic drift, just kind of saying we know roughly at the rate at which natural mutations occur in DNA, and if we follow this back, some of it is bones, and then there are these hominids. They're sort of human, and they have human characteristics, but are they really chimps? Neanderthals are one of the ones that have really gotten people rehabilitating Neanderthals. For a long time, they wanted them to be a transitional form between humans and chimps. And it turns out that we coexisted with Neanderthals for a long time. But yeah, so it's just a very chaotic mess. And the thing that I think, and we're kind of cut to the chase in terms of, is two things. One is, in the past, I don't know, maybe since the 1970s into the 1980s, there's been an explosion of molecular biology, the actual specific details of how life works. And what we realize, as Michael Behe in his excellent book, Darwin's Black Box, points out, these are all molecular machines. They very much are nanomachines, very highly specialized, very precise little machines. That's what our bodies are. That's what life is. Not only do these machines live and survive, they are self-repairing. So
oh, yes.
it's like, imagine your car, needing a new motor. And it comes up.
Generating
it generates it
motor.
internally from inside of itself. That's unbelievable. It's nothing that we can even think about in terms of our current technology. And then they're self-replicating. Mm-hmm. So suddenly your computer or whatever is making other computers.
Right.
That's stunning amount of design and complexity.
But the smoke screen has always been, but if you have enough time.
There isn't enough time.
And so I want you to address that question, that it is a smoke screen. Even they know there's not enough time for these things to happen.
No one disagrees in the scientific community that the origin of life research, the very, very first bacteria or cell, whatever you want to be, that would come together, it needs biochemical precursors. It needs amino acids, it needs proteins, it needs things like that to even form. Well, where do they come from? There's nothing in the fossil record to suggest there was ever some sort of a carbon layer, that there was a primordial soup that was really common. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, the conditions were actually adverse to the formation of these things. And then it's all information. So I think about, there's a third thing, which I don't know how much time we have to really discuss, is what is your DNA code? What is protein? It's all information. It's like an alphabet. So, and these things have to be in the right order. It's like saying, okay, we're going to do, Shakespeare randomly. That was something that was popular in the 19th century. If we had randomly typing, monkeys sitting
a chimp,
right. So a chimp. So someone actually did the calculation. If every square foot of the Earth were covered by chimps at typewriters, longer than the universe has been in existence, they couldn't even come up with one sentence that was cogent, that made sense.
Okay.
Because it's all just junk. It's just gibberish. They'd just be banging away. They'd be pressing the letter T 10,000 times, whatever it is, or just things that don't make any logical sense. So this idea of big numbers, it generally just generates more trash, things that don't make any sense. So there's that. And then the circumstances really weren't there to allow these chemicals to come together, and I think that's pretty well known. Then it has to create these really complex machines. And then I think the thing interestingly now is heredities. We've misunderstood heredity for the past, since Mendel. Actually, in the 20th century more. This whole idea of DNA makes RNA, makes protein, the central dogma. Are you familiar with that? Mm-hmm. So, and for decades, as people started understanding more of what genes were, we found that 90% of the genome was quote unquote junk. So, So you're familiar with that.
That's one of my favorite
Right,
topics.
It's an interesting topic. It's an excellent topic, and that's exactly what you would predict if you're an evolutionist. Just like your computer's filled with junk. You got files and stuff you stopped using, and music you don't listen to, pictures you don't use. So accumulating that over eons, you would imagine that your cells are filled with junk, and there was some useful part of it. Well, it turns out, and it's something called the ENCODE project, which people have been really trying to shut down because it's been an embarrassment and not fun. What they've demonstrated is, I think that they're approaching 90% and more of that junk actually is useful.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily DNA making a protein template. It's regulatory information. So, for example, most of the software in your computer regulates what the computer does.
Okay.
It's very sophisticated regulation of genes and how to make proteins.
So you can't be without those so-called junk genes.
No,
they really
those
are
junk
doing
genes
something.
define who you are. And just as an example, because I know we've talked about this, people find it interesting. Are we 97 or 98%, chimps in terms of our DNA code? Well, that's sort of like saying that Shakespeare is 100% identical to the dictionary.
Yeah.
Because the words that he uses,
Yeah.
the genes, it's the way they're used, expressed, organized. The cogent narrative that those genes come up with, that's actually the trick.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we have more homology with rodents than we do with chimps.
Yeah, and that's interesting.
But it's just how it's organized. and then, but even to get weirder than that, it looks like DNA is not the only way that we get our hereditary traits. There's something called epigenetics, which has become an explosive field. Their membranes are also inherited in your the cells, your sperm and your egg and stuff like that. And there's information in those membranes that regulate how DNA and other things work. And then DNA, for example, if you're Irish and your great-grandparents were in the potato famine, their genes were being methylated by their environmental stress. They're literally being marked, the DNA chromosomes, and those are passed on. So your metabolic makeup is different. You're more likely to gain weight, have heart disease because of your great-grandparents, but your DNA sequence is the same.
That's interesting.
And that's well established.
Okay,
no one argues it. So it's not just DNA.
Because they suffered something.
Correct.
And if they have children in that period of crisis,
correct,
they pass on something.
Their DNA is literally
more
marked.
Than just the.
Their DNA is literally marked. The DNA code
does that
is
mean
the same.
it's changed
The DNA
or
code
enhanced, or just
DNA.
that's the way it is?
Well, they're marked, and what it does is it affects the way and the circumstances in which those genes become active.
Oh my gosh! So then that's like the sins of the father. That is just brutally true. I think. Now it's too true.
Well, and it's an embarrassment to Darwinists because the big debate was between Darwinism, which was these hereditary traits are occurring because of mutation and selection, right? So there's mutations going on, and then the good ones are preserved, and the bad ones are gotten rid of. And then there was a whole school, and this is not actually true, there was a guy named Lamarck, and being a Lamarckian was the worst thing you could say to a biologist. They, for example, thought like giraffes got long necks because they kept stretching to reach leaves.
Right.
So because of this behavior, they started passing on stretched necks. But it's turning out your great-grandparents' behavior is kind of passed on molecularly. It's sort of a mixture of both.
That is wild. I didn't realize that. But that's a really important reason to pass on family history to the children.
It is.
So they know, where did something come from?
Right.
Why am I like this?
Well,
and
it's also a reason you should be careful about your own life.
Oh, that's not fair.
No, it's also true.
Oh, gosh.
And then we've got hundreds of genomes now. I don't even know what the latest number is. How many complete genomes of living things that we've sequenced? The technology has become, as you know, relatively cheap and inexpensive. And that doesn't form a tree of life. And Craig Venner was one of the best-known people in that field, calls it a bush of life. Because we don't descend from some common ancestor. The same gene in a different person regulates a different thing. So how can that be? And then we've got different genes.
Okay, but we still come from a common ancestor, but it doesn't...
Not genetically. There's no way to put together what's called a tree of life using what we know about genomes. And it's a real embarrassment.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, let's take the first part of the sentence. Can we say we all come from the same ancestor?
Well, if that ancestor is a bacteria, or that's tough to say.
No, I mean of the same parents.
Well,
same
human
set of
parents.
That's what I mean.
Most likely, yes, but there's like an Adam and Eve,
yeah.
That kind of stuff. Most likely, yes, but even there's a little bit of we come from some sort of human precursors for sure.
Okay.
And I think it was Pius XII in 1950 would he have been Pope, and Humani Generis basically said that we cannot believe in polygenism as Catholics. We have to come from one set of primordial parents for theological reasons, and it's also probably true biologically. And we can trace that through DNA that's only inherited from the father and only inherited from the mother. And,
okay.
And so,
and when to a common person like myself, that means that's what I mean when there's a family tree.
I just don't know how far back you wanted to go.
No. That's far back enough for me.
Because the other thing about the fossil record, I just sort of jump around a little bit, one of the problems with it, because it doesn't show what people say it should show if you believe in Darwinism, this sort of steady progression, transitional forms, is they need to fill in the gaps. And they're actually, if you look in the literature, they actually describe something called ghost lineages.
Oh, tell me. That sounds great.
There are things that should be there in order to have either a precursor or a successor of some sort, but they don't exist in the fossil record. So, for example, a human, line of some sort that, or hominid or a plant line or something that will connect the dots. They don't exist. So they literally start acting as if they do. They just start calling them ghost lineages, and eventually we'll discover them.
You mean the evolutionists talk
that way. The evolutionists talk like that, yeah. And because the fossil record doesn't demonstrate what they needed to demonstrate.
All right. Now, evolutionists are the people who think...
We should call them Darwinists, actually. Yeah.
Really?
I think so.
Okay. And is Darwinism always considered atheistic?
Well...
when you speak of it, commonly...
As a practical matter, it is a form of materialism.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know of anybody other than certain. I should take a step back. Stephen Collins, for example, was a huge world-class geneticist, one of the key people in deciphering the human genome first. He's an evangelical Christian, and he claims he's a Darwinist. I think one of the reasons he does is because it makes it really uncomfortable at work to claim that he's a fundamentalist Christian. I don't know what his actual beliefs are. But if you read his book, he's basically trying to have it both ways.
Oh, yeah. But you know what? That might be because of, as a Protestant, he doesn't see the connection between faith and reason.
Could be.
And that he really, according to his faith, he accepts God through revelation. He doesn't.
Or he's a fundamentalist about the Genesis story.
Oh, yeah, that's possible.
I don't think anyone listening to this, any Catholic who's at all educated, actually thinks that it's meant to be literal. It's an explanation where, we come from, where the universe comes from, who's responsible, that there's sort of a progression of things. And actually, I would prefer that people start talking about, instead of evolution of species, a preparation. Because really what we see in life leading to humans is preparation. The atmosphere, other living things, other things that we depend on. It's really just been a preparation for us. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that God is trying to explain. It's not a scientific document. I've yet to come across an equation anywhere in the Gospel or the Old Testament or data. It's a history of our salvation.
Yeah,
and it's an explanation.
And it's more than a history.
But these fundamentalists, because they want to say, it was 6 days.
Yeah, I know. Well, there wasn't even an Earth to go around the sun, or
correct. Correct.
Now, which moves around which?
So your answer is, I think and Darwin himself. That's why I'm sort of thinking about it. Darwin, because it was still a very inflammatory thing in Victorian England to claim that you were an atheist and to claim that I have a theory which eliminates the necessity for God in the Christian. Because everyone was seeing evidence for design everywhere. People go for a walk in the woods and go, "That's unbelievable! Look at the beauty, whatever." And people instinctively want to worship God or something like God when they observe nature, particularly when the laboratory, when it's the beautiful elegance of how things actually function. And this is just mud sitting around for millions of years. Does this just spontaneously just wait long enough? I mean, that's kind of hard for people instinctively to believe. So Darwin, over time, became a little bit more bold in his own expression of his lack of religious belief, and it was materialism. All of his children are actually eugenicists.
Yeah.
They were.
Yeah. Why do those go hand in hand?
Well, because it's survival of the fittest. And what I find amusing about that is all the other laws. And if evolution is a law, do we need to help along the law of gravity? Of course, we're the table, our chairs, we are sitting here. We don't have to help the law of gravity. It works. Why does evolution need to be helped if it's a law?
Have to be managed.
Why does it need to be helped?
Why does the gene pool have to be managed?
No, if it's a law, it's just going to happen.
Right.
There's nothing we can do to stop it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And of course, he hated the Irish in particular. I don't know if you know that.
That's not surprising.
Well,
I'm sure they didn't like him too much either. But
he loved the Scots.
Yeah,
they were thrifty and
yeah, so he wanted to promote that gene pool.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's interesting that eugenics always comes into the picture with the Darwinists. But okay, the people who study these things and promote these things, they're reading the same things that you have over the years.
There are plenty of.
But there must be. I mean, they're countering these arguments, or what is it that they?
Well, the biggest strategy is actually, and we see this now in the public square, is you eliminate the discussion of topics that you don't like.
And that's really what happens.
And that's largely what's been happening for a long time in the scientific community. It's a lucky thing that I'm not a bench scientist trying to publish things, because if they ever found out what my real beliefs were, it would be very difficult, it'd be embarrassing. Even though you're saying, I love science and I love to do science well, we should do science well, the conclusions that we're drawing from it don't necessarily follow based on what you're doing. So,
and that's why we don't hear enough from scientists.
And you can't get a PhD
because
you'll be discriminated against at work. You won't get published. And it's been well documented by Ben Stein in his movie and other things. People that occasionally an intelligent design paper will sneak in, or something that sort of talks about it. Or the things that we've been talking about, the genomes not actually showing a progression of genes, that's in peer-reviewed literature, I mean, the real literature, but they can't draw the obvious conclusion. They can just simply say that, these things aren't following the way they should, but the conclusion always is, well, someone once called it promissory materialism. The proof of materialism is still coming, it's a promise, right? And so we'll eventually get there.
But of course we know this is true.
But the thing that's a difficulty for them is the more we learn about biology and of life, it's more and more precise. It's instinctively, it seems a lot less likely you're going to find a random chance explanation for these incredibly sophisticated nanomachines and things where a slight change in some component of them wrecks the whole thing. And that's suddenly we're going to find another random explanation. It is a theory in crisis.
So, but you would say intelligent design. When we say that means that God is just involved in...
Well, the intelligent design movement, and it's been largely evangelical Christians, actually, give them credit, who have been pushing it, and the Discovery Institute in Seattle, people associated with them. They don't want to make a claim as to who the designer is. And I think for good reason. You want to be sectarian about it. Is it the Protestant God? Is it the Catholic God? Is it, whatever God? It's so we just, there's a residue of intelligence, that's my own definition, that's clearly discernible. Who or what that intelligence is, that then becomes another speculation, becomes revelation or theology or however you want to see it. But there's a residue of intelligence all throughout the created world. Certainly in biology, of course, then, the Big Bang, where did that come from? It just keeps getting worse and worse. So it would have to be some sort of intelligent design, because to think of another way random chance would operate, what would it be? If it's just things sitting there, then something like Darwinism seems to be the only explanation.
So the three choices are Darwinism, intelligent design, or fundamental create. I don't mean scientific, but I mean these are the three discussed. Philosophical.
I don't think anyone really seriously discusses this sort of fundamentalist, creationism stuff.
Okay.
There's a
but
group out there.
There's not something new on the horizon, is there?
Yeah, no,
that I have to know about.
No, not really. I mean, some of the things are interesting, like. In order to believe what the New Earth creationists is what they call them, because the Earth, if you count back the generations, then the Earth is 6,000 years old or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it's even younger.
In order to really believe that, you would have to believe that the laws of physics have changed over time. That mutation rates that we normally see now were different back then.
Right.
That the fundamental operations of gravity and things like that, or the way the universe we know. We don't really know a lot about. People talk about dark energy, for example. 95% of the universe is unknown, and people have been calling it dark energy, and they've been trying to find the particles that make up dark energy for decades. They can't find even one. Also, the dark energy properties that explain the expansion of the universe don't explain the other mature properties of the universe. So how can that be? So they're falling into this trap of having to basically deny the laws of physics as we know them now, and then anything can be true.
Right.
Then when science ends, basically.
And then it's kind of arbitrary. Knowledge is arbitrary.
Right. And one of the things that people talk about is how can we really be certain that the laws of physics are the same on the other side of the universe? Science sort of presupposes that when we're looking at the formation of galaxies and things, way, way far away, that they're following the same laws that things closer are. Well, okay, we just have to assume that. Otherwise, it's not science.
Just a kind of a random question. Does evolution or Darwinism have the same problem present the same problem to other major world religions? Do the Hindus discuss this? Do the Muslims discuss this?
The Hindus, this is slightly outside of my sort of professional expertise, but just something that I have an interest in. I think it's very well established that science is something that could only occur in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Lots of philosophers of science have pointed out why that's the case. We believe in a God who is regular, who establishes covenants, follows his word, is unchanging, intelligent, then it makes sense to study phenomena because things are repeatable,
right.
And we can depend on them. And particularly in something like Islam, everything is on the whim or the act of the will of Allah.
Mm-hmm.
So one day, that apple that fell from the tree on Newton's head won't fall on his head because Allah will decide that, he ought to do that.
It doesn't need gravity.
Doesn't need that. Or the rules will change. So every single thing, and so that's why they have this master-slave relationship with their God, is because it's very fickle. And God is not regular. And most Oriental religions don't even really get into things like rationality and, if something is good and something's bad at the same time, they don't, it's something very unique to Judeo-Christian tradition.
And so is the evolutionary argument. I don't think they're wrestling with it over there.
I don't think they have any interest in it by and large philosophically. I mean, maybe they do. I'm not really sure, but
I would think it's only through Western eyes that they can do it.
Yeah. I think it's an idea that certainly in Islam they're not spending, or in China. One of the interesting things is the guy who was the primary scientist who's responsible for that big Chinese discovery of fossils. Was interviewed, or maybe this was just something that I read about. It wasn't a complete interview. It was someone talking about their conversation with him, and he was sort of making the point that this is not demonstrating Darwinism, and your work, these fossil finds, how are you dealing with that in China? He said they don't care. So he said,
I love it.
He said you can't criticize the government, but you can criticize Darwin.
Oh, good.
And here it's the reverse, right? You can't criticize Darwin, but you can criticize the government. So
that's useful.
And I just would have thought that communists would be a little bit more sensitive to something that could demonstrate at least the residue.
It seemed to be, they use the language of Darwinism.
Certainly, the Russian sort of Soviet.
Yeah, the new man, and man was going to evolve into something new, which was so bizarre to me. I don't know how people could read that and take it seriously.
Yeah, and as we know, most mutations and changes are negative.
That's right.
So,
are any of them? Can you ever go from a non-complex organ to a more complex organ?
Just spontaneously?
Yeah.
No.
Or I guess
that's never been observed.
And
what typically happens is, let's say,
you see growth, but that's not evolution.
There's something called Mueller's ratchet in bacteria, and because what they'll do is they will grow bacteria and mutate them by exposing them to antibiotics. What happens is, yes, they're resistant to antibiotics, but they become unhealthy and stop growing.
Oh.
So it comes at a huge cost.
To the colony.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's what we're going to have to end it there. John, thanks so much.
Thank you,
was
Priscilla.
wonderful.